Hi, welcome back to Golf Training Hacks. Getting the club head back to the impact point with some consistency is a problem for so many recreational golfers. But what's often overlooked is that the starting point of your golf swing is really important to create consistency at the end of your golf swing. That means the takeaway and how you take the club away from the ball is so important. Why is starting so important? Because in most sports movements, if you don't start in a good position, it's really tough to end up in a good position. When you have movements that have high force and high velocity, it's really tough to begin that movement in a poor position, then adjust on the fly to get you back to a good position. For the golf swing, that starts with your takeaway. It's so important to get a good takeaway. Unfortunately, what a lot of golfers do is they'll begin to set their wrists too early, they'll pull their arms back, or maybe they'll bring their arms too high. What you really need is rotation. You start with rotation, and it starts with your hips and then your shoulders. On your takeaway, you need to rotate into this hip, and that's internal rotation. Because you want to get this club started with rotation, not with your hands and arms. So you're going to rotate back into this hip, you're going to keep your elbows in front of your ribs, and you're going to rotate so that you can take this club back without doing too much movement here. That's going to create variability in your swing. When you take the club back with your elbows in front of your ribs and using rotation, you can bring this club back the same way every time. But if you use too much wrist or too much arm, whether it be pulling it back or bringing it up, it's really tough to get back to the exact same spot every time. You're adding variability to your swing, and that's never going to be a good thing. But to be able to perform the takeaway correctly, you need hip internal rotation. Because in order to rotate your hips correctly, you need to get into this hip internal rotation position. If you're lacking that and you're stuck here, then you have no other choice but to do something with your hands and arms to get the club back, because you can't rotate. So rotation in your hips is very important, in particular hip internal rotation, and a lot of us have lost that for many reasons, and one of the big reasons that we sit too much. So rotation is very important in the golf swing, obviously, and hip internal rotation is critical. We have a lot of videos on hip mobility, and in particular hip internal rotation. So check those out if you're having trouble with your takeaway and you just can't get into this rear hip. So in this video, we're going to give you some exercises to help you improve your hip rotation, and in particular, your hip internal rotation. Hip internal rotation is critically important to the golf swing. So this is hip internal rotation on this side, right? That's hip internal rotation. So we can get some movement in our hip capsule by doing a rock into our right and left side. So if you recall, a basic rocking motion, if you've seen our video on that, is simply this. You're looking up and you look down. You look up and you look down. So what I'm going to do is, instead of going straight back like this, instead of going straight back, I'm going to look down. As I come up, I'm going to look up and look to the ceiling, and I'm going to shift my weight onto this shoulder. I'm going to continue to look to the ceiling, and then I'm going to sink back into this hip. Okay, look up, rock straight back. Look up, find the ceiling, right? I'm sinking into this hip. Okay, so it looks like this. Down, look up, sink into this hip. You can stay on one side, you can alternate. Down, look up, and now weight's on this shoulder, and I'm sinking into this hip. So here we go. And I'm breathing. And as I'm going back, I'm looking for the ceiling and trying to find the wall. So I'm getting some head and neck movement in this too. Look for the ceiling, looking for the wall. I'm on this hip now. Find the ceiling, through my legs, up, find the wall, back, through my legs. Internal rotation is really important. Opening up your hips is really important for your golf swing. And doing that type of rock is a great way to do it. Now you go to where you can. If you can't move your head too much, you keep, just go to where you can. And if that's all you got, then that's fine. If it just looks like this, you get a little at a time. Maybe you can't even go back that far. A little at a time. And actually, just getting up and off the floor is really good for you too. Hip internal rotation is critically important for your golf swing. In this exercise segment, we're going to go over a hip capsule mobility drill or technique. And we got this from Dr. Kelly Starrett. We followed Kelly for a very long time. He doesn't know us, but we sure know him. If you really want to learn about mobility, I would check out the Ready State and Kelly Starrett. It's a fabulous website. There's all kinds of information on there. Okay, so this is going to be a hip capsule mobilization. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show it from the side first. And my shoulders are square to this mat. I'm not going to change that position, but what I'm doing is kicking this foot out and then blocking it with this foot. So my shoulders stay square, and I'm going into internal rotation on my left side. Now from the front, my shoulders are going to stay square here, and I'm going to put this foot out and block it here. Okay, so that's the position I want to be in because this is hip internal rotation. So what I'm actually doing is, when I do the technique, I'm actually driving my femur or my thigh bone into the ground, pressing my knee into the ground. I'm pressing and turning into hip internal rotation. Okay, so I'm pressing into the ground and I'm turning, and I'm not collapsing back like this. So I'm going to go on a little bit of an angle here, and I'm going to go into internal rotation. I feel that hip capsule wound up, and now I'm going to press my knee into the ground and turn into my left side. So I'm just going to press in, I'm pressing my knee, and I'm turning into my left side. I'm pressing and turning, pressing and turning. Okay, so if you go like this, I lost that hip internal rotation. That's why you have to stay square, and you're going to feel that hip capsule winding up. Now, I'm not collapsing like this. I'm driving my knee into the mat, trying to get my thigh bone up through my hip, and I'm pressing and I'm turning into the left side. Okay? And you should be breathing when you're doing this, in and out through your nose. Okay, so that's a hip capsule mobilization. Okay, hip internal rotation, really important for your golf swing. So in a previous video, we showed you a basic hip capsule mobilization. In this video, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to boost it up a little bit and add a little bit of isometric contractions to it, which should help you improve your hip internal rotation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kick this foot out. That's going into internal rotation. I'm going to block this foot, this leg, with this right side. So if you see it from here, I'm kicking this foot out. I'm keeping my shoulders square to the mat, and I'm blocking here. Now what I'm going to do before I do the mobilization, which basically is taking my knee, driving it into the mat, trying to take my femur or my thigh bone up through my hip, and I am pressing in and turning into my left side. So I'm pressing down and turning in. I'm pressing down and turning in. Okay, I'm not collapsing. It's not this kind of motion. I'm pressing down and turning in. Pressing into the ground and turning in, okay? And I'm not losing my internal rotation by going out here. I'm staying square, and you'll feel your hip capsule wound up. So to make that a little more effective now, I'm going to take this foot, I'm going to press it into that foot, and hold it for 4 seconds. So I'm going to take a deep breath in. Now on a 4 count, I'm going to press into this foot. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000. Release the breath from my nose. And now I'm going to get a little bit more of that internal rotation. Breathe in. Press. And 4, and release. Inhale and exhale through your nose, and I get a little bit more. Okay, and now I'm going to do my oscillations. I'm pressing into the ground and turning, pressing into the ground and turning, pressing into the ground and turning, okay? So that's a little more advanced way to get some movement and internal rotation into that hip capsule.